She destroyed my career. My sister sabotaged my medical school interview. Then, she needed the surgeon I became. The morning that changed my life arrived with an unsettling silence. I was supposed to be in Baltimore, sitting across from admissions staff at Johns Hopkins Medical School for the culmination of my life's work. Instead, I woke up well after 9:45 a.m., disoriented by the bright sunlight streaming through my window. My first instinct was panic. The interview had been scheduled for 8 o'clock. The crucial appointment that held the key to one of the nation's premier medical programs. It was gone. My mobile device, which I distinctly remembered placing on my bedside table, was inexplicably positioned across the room, its screen dark. When I finally reached it, the blinking notifications confirmed my worst fears. 17 calls, all missed, from Johns Hopkins Medical School, demanding to know why I had failed to appear for my 8 a.m. slot. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through the warnings. Voicemails stacked up, along with an urgent email from the administrative team. I played the first recording. The voice was professional, slightly strained. "Miss Hartley, this is Dr. Okonkwo from admissions. We had you slated for an interview this morning. Please contact us immediately to reschedule if a genuine emergency prevented your arrival." The second voicemail, logged 20 minutes later, was noticeably colder. The same woman, now clearly irritated. "Miss Hartley, we have since received a call from someone claiming to be you, stating you are no longer interested in our institution. We require immediate confirmation from you directly that this cancellation is accurate." The third message, delivered by the admissions director, felt like a fatal blow. "Miss Hartley, we are rescinding your interview opportunity. A call was placed this morning at 7:30 a.m. by an individual claiming to be you, asserting that you had chosen alternative paths. If this communication was not authorized by you, you must provide a full explanation within the hour. Otherwise, we are obligated to proceed with alternate candidates." I frantically dialed the number, but it went straight to a generalized recording. I left a desperate, choked message, swearing I had never called, never canceled, insisting something was profoundly wrong. I tried 3 more times without success. I bombarded them with emails and called the main university switchboard. Finally, I managed to connect with an administrative assistant who confirmed the irreversible damage. The admissions committee, she explained stiffly, had already finalized the replacement for my vacated slot and moved forward. The person who called had been extremely convincing, she emphasized, and the call log indicated it originated from my registered telephone number. Unless I could definitively prove that I wasn't the caller, there was simply nothing they could do. My phone number. I checked my outgoing call log. There was absolutely no record of a call placed to Johns Hopkins at 7:30 a.m. But I remembered. My phone had been moved, far from the nightstand where I always kept it. My alarm had been completely disabled. I went downstairs, descending into the bright kitchen where my older sister, Vanessa, was peacefully brewing coffee. She was 26, 2 years my senior, and had successfully gained acceptance to medical school on her first application 3 years prior. She was currently thriving, already finishing her 3rd year at a respectable program, maintaining honors, the epitome of the perfect daughter our parents constantly lauded. Vanessa glanced up, offering a serene smile. "Good morning. You're up awfully late. Didn't you have that big interview today?" In that single instant, every fragmented piece of the puzzle clicked into a terrifyingly clear picture. The phone relocated across the room. The deleted alarm setting. My car keys, which were invariably on the hook by the entryway, conspicuously absent. I had returned home temporarily during my gap year, working as an EMT to accumulate crucial funds. Vanessa had moved back 2 months ago, citing an expiring lease and a desire to save money before her residency applications. Our parents had been overjoyed to have their 2 professional daughters back under one roof. "What exactly did you do?" I demanded. My voice emerged low and steady, frighteningly devoid of emotion. She took a slow, deliberate sip of her coffee. "I don't know what you mean. You revoked my interview. You contacted them, impersonating me, and unilaterally canceled my spot. That's an insane accusation, Jenna. Why would I ever do that?" "Because," I stated, stepping closer, "you've enjoyed 3 years as the undisputed golden child, and the idea of me getting into a program potentially superior to yours was unbearable." A fleeting shadow crossed her composure, A subtle, undeniable flicker. It was pure, unadulterated satisfaction. This wasn't an accident. This was calculated. She had meticulously orchestrated the destruction of the most critical opportunity of my academic life. "You're inventing scenarios out of paranoia," she replied smoothly. "Perhaps you simply failed to wake up and are seeking a scapegoat for your own failure." My alarm was erased. My phone was moved. My keys are gone. And someone called from a number linked to me to cancel. How do you explain that? Maybe you did it subconsciously. You've always been highly strung before major milestones. Remember the panic attack you had right before the MCAT? She was using the emotional tactic, gaslighting me, right there in our family kitchen, casual and composed, while drinking coffee, attempting to shatter my entire future. What was I supposed to do now? I retrieved my phone, pulling up the call log once more, thrusting it near her face. "There's no outgoing call here at 7:30 a.m., but they confirmed someone called from my number." "How did you manage it, Vanessa?" "I genuinely have no insight into your delusions, Jenna. But frankly, this victim mentality is precisely why you struggle to gain acceptance into elite programs. You must accept responsibility for your own setbacks." I wanted to let loose a primal scream, wanted to seize her cup and shatter it against the pristine white tiles. Instead, I forced myself to retreat upstairs, locking the door firmly behind me. I called Johns Hopkins one last time. This time, I was put through directly to Dr. Okonkwo. I carefully recounted the entire sequence, that I hadn't canceled, that someone had impersonated me, and that my device showed no corresponding outgoing call. Dr. Okonkwo listened with impressive patience. "Miss Hartley," she finally said, her voice weighted with understanding. "The individual who called possessed specific, highly sensitive information regarding your candidacy, your undergraduate institution, your MCAT score, your precise research background. This was not a random action." "That confirms it," I insisted. "It was my sister. She lives here. She has access to all those documents. Can you produce undeniable proof that she was the perpetrator?" "No, I admit it, the sound hollow. But I can prove that I was not the caller. My phone log is clean. Someone must have utilized a number spoofing application or called from a secondary device." Dr. Okonkwo sighed deeply. "Even granting that possibility, we have already officially allocated your slot to another successful candidate. Our interview cycle is almost finished. I sincerely regret this, but we have no room for you this cycle." My sister had successfully obliterated my trajectory toward my dream school, and she would face zero repercussions. "I appreciate your frustration, Miss Hartley. However, without concrete, tangible evidence, this remains a dispute between family members, not an issue for our admissions board. You are absolutely encouraged to reapply next year." She ended the call. I sat on my mattress, gazing blankly at the wall. The enormity of the betrayal was paralyzing. 4 arduous years of rigorous academic work had been instantly wiped out because my own sibling could not tolerate my potential success. I applied immediately to 12 alternative medical institutions, securing 6 interview invitations. During every single interview morning, Vanessa suddenly became suspiciously occupied, often leaving the house hours before dawn. I implemented drastic security measures, sleeping with my phone secured beneath my pillow, setting a minimum of 5 different alarms, and concealing my car keys deep inside my bedroom closet. I trusted her with nothing related to my application progress. My parents observed the palpable hostility, but completely failed to grasp its origin. When I attempted to detail Vanessa's deliberate actions, they instantly dismissed me, calling my reaction overly dramatic. "Vanessa would never contemplate such a destructive act," they insisted. They suggested, echoing Vanessa's words, that perhaps I had merely overslept and was desperately trying to deflect the embarrassment of my own failure. Their golden child was incapable of wrongdoing. I was merely the struggling younger daughter who perpetually failed to organize her life. 3 of my 6 remaining interviews proceeded reasonably well. One was a disaster, largely because my debilitating paranoia about further sabotage made sustained focus impossible. 2 others were distinctly average. I was ultimately waitlisted at 2 schools and received outright rejection letters from the remaining 4. Vanessa, meanwhile, secured her top-choice residency position. My parents promptly hosted a lavish celebration dinner in her honor. I sat through the evening, forcing smiles while they raised repeated toasts to her incredible achievement. Across the table, Vanessa met my gaze and offered a tiny, utterly satisfied smirk, a fleeting expression visible only to me. I spent the subsequent year immersed in EMT work and painstakingly reapplying to medical schools. This time, I prioritized freedom over finance. I rented my own space, a minuscule studio apartment I could barely afford. I was done living under the same roof as her. I would not allow her a second opportunity to dismantle my future. I targeted 15 schools this cycle, earning 9 interviews and ultimately securing acceptance into 3 programs. None of them were Hopkins, but one was a reputable state university with an excellent academic reputation. I accepted their offer and began classes that autumn. That same year, Vanessa commenced her residency training in neurosurgery at a highly prestigious hospital in Boston. My parents were beside themselves with pride. She was on the path to becoming a world-class brain surgeon. I, conversely, was simply attending some state university they had barely heard of. Medical school proved relentless. There was not a single day I didn't contemplate dropping out. The academic load was overwhelming. The competitive atmosphere was palpable. Every classmate seemed inherently smarter, better prepared, more naturally gifted than me. I doubled my study time, simply struggling to keep pace. I failed my initial anatomy test. I barely scraped a passing grade in pharmacology. I spent endless nights in the dimly lit library until 3 a.m., tediously memorizing metabolic pathways and complex drug interactions. But I possessed a secret advantage that my privileged classmates lacked. Pure, concentrated fury. Rage directed entirely at my sister for her catastrophic act. Rage fueled me when exhaustion demanded rest. Every time the urge to surrender arose, I conjured the image of her smug smirk at that celebration, the memory of her deleting my alarm, the vivid recollection of the stolen Hopkins slot, and the subsequent absence of consequences. That intense, focused anger became the engine that sustained me when self-doubt threatened to halt my progress. I consciously decided to pursue cardiothoracic surgery, the most demanding surgical discipline, requiring the longest training tenure, involving the highest stakes, and demanding the most punishing schedules. Vanessa had selected neurosurgery for its reputation and prestige. I selected cardiothoracic because I was determined to become unequivocally better than her in an arena she could never touch. Was this truly ambition, or just spite? By the 3rd year of medical school, clinical rotations began. I volunteered for every available extra shift. I was constantly present in the operating theater, volunteering to observe every complex procedure, frequently staying late just to absorb techniques. The supervising attending physicians began to notice my intense dedication. One of them, Dr. Raymond Oae, a renowned cardiothoracic surgeon, stopped me after assisting with an exceptionally intricate case. "You've logged more time in the OR than any other medical student this year. What drives that dedication?" "Because I love the challenge, and I am determined to be the absolute best," I responded immediately. He assessed me with a penetrating look. "Surgery isn't primarily about being the best, Miss Hartley. It's about achieving a level of competence sufficient to preserve lives when the stakes are highest. Then I aim to be competent enough that I never lose a patient due to my own inadequacy or lack of skill." He nodded slowly. "You have the necessary internal drive. Now you need to master precision. Come observe my upcoming cases. I will instruct you in what I can." Dr. Oae transformed into my primary mentor. He was ruthlessly demanding and often harsh, but he clearly recognized an inherent potential in me. He permitted me to perform tasks far beyond the standard scope for medical students, holding specialized retractors, meticulously closing superficial incisions, and challenging me with critical questions throughout the procedures. He pushed me to accelerate my decision-making, refine my physical movements, and grasp not just the mechanics of the operation, but the crucial underlying clinical rationale. I graduated medical school comfortably within the top 10% of my class. Not valedictorian, but a highly respectable standing. I applied for cardiothoracic surgery residencies. I received interview invitations from 6 top-tier programs. I matched successfully at a strong program located in Philadelphia, not the absolute pinnacle of training, but institutionally recognized for consistently training superb surgeons. Vanessa completed her neurosurgery residency that same year. She immediately accepted a highly lucrative position at a premier Boston hospital, earning nearly twice my resident salary. My parents flew out for her official white coat ceremony. They did not attend mine, as the ceremonies overlapped, and they had already committed their presence to hers. Residency was an extended nightmare. 100-hour work weeks, surgeries that often stretched 12, 14, even 16 hours without pause. Attendings who would immediately unleash torrents of criticism for the slightest error. Patients who tragically succumbed, despite the tireless application of our collective best efforts. I shed far more weight than was healthy. I strictly limited my sleep to 4 hours per night, existing in a perpetual state of exhausting adrenaline overload. Yet I improved. I grew faster. I became demonstrably more precise. By the commencement of my 3rd year, I was the resident specifically requested by attendings for the most technically demanding cases. I was the person they trusted to execute complicated dissections, the one who maintained an unnerving calm when complications erupted in the operating theater. Dr. Oae, who had since relocated to Philadelphia and was now an attending physician at my institution, once remarked that I was the most inherently gifted surgical resident he had taught across 2 decades. I didn't believe the compliment. I knew my success wasn't natural talent. Every single skill had been meticulously forged through repetition, through focused anger, and through my sheer refusal to be anything less than extraordinary. In the 5th year of residency, I achieved the position of chief resident. This meant overseeing the cohort of other residents, coordinating the intricate surgical schedules, managing the entire service line, and being the designated recipient of the 3 a.m. calls for every emergency, every disastrous complication, every patient teetering on the edge of death. I practically lived inside the hospital walls, my apartment serving only as a storage space for my clothing and an occasional shower facility. Vanessa, according to my parents' frequent, boastful updates, was flourishing in Boston. She was publishing impactful research in prestigious journals, delivering lectures at international conferences, and dating a successful corporate lawyer. Everything in her life appeared utterly flawless. I maintained zero contact with her. We hadn't exchanged a genuine word in 6 years, limited only to minimal, forced pleasantries during unavoidable family gatherings. She had never offered an apology, never even obliquely acknowledged the sabotage. My parents remained convinced I was simply nurturing an irrational, dramatic grievance. Upon completing residency, I was accepted into a highly competitive cardiothoracic surgery fellowship program at Mass General in Boston. This entailed 2 additional years of intensive, focused training, learning directly from the foremost surgeons in the nation. Vanessa was still working in Boston. I deliberately withheld the information about my relocation from her. The fellowship was even more rigorous than residency. Cases were exponentially more complex, and my level of responsibility was immense. I was performing operations on hearts that previous surgeons had declared inoperable. I conducted delicate transplants, intricate repairs, procedures that demanded microscopic levels of precision. Loss was inevitable in cardiac surgery. I tragically lost patients. But I successfully saved significantly more than I lost. My overall success rate began to surpass that of the other fellows. The attendings once again took notice. Dr. Kenji Yamamoto, the revered head of the cardiac surgery department, started consistently assigning me high-risk cases that the other fellows were not yet deemed ready to handle. 1 year into my fellowship, I received a frantic phone call from my mother. She was hysterical, barely coherent through her tears. Vanessa had suddenly collapsed while at work. She had been rushed immediately to the emergency room. The diagnosis, a severe brain aneurysm. She required immediate, high-stakes emergency surgery. I registered the news with an unsettling, cold analytical detachment. Which hospital are they transferring her to? Mass General, my mother sobbed. They're actively preparing her for surgery now. Can you possibly come? I am already at Mass General, I replied, my voice steady. I will investigate her status immediately. I terminated the call and proceeded directly to the surgical department. I quickly located Vanessa's chart in the system. The aneurysm was catastrophic, large, irregularly shaped, and situated in an extremely difficult anatomical location. The risk profile was severe: High probability of rupture during the procedure, significant danger of a debilitating stroke, or death. The neurosurgeon officially assigned to her case was Dr. Neil Hoffman, widely regarded as one of the very best in the department. However, he was currently deep into another lengthy, complicated surgery that was running far behind schedule. They needed an operator now. Time was critical. The attending neurosurgeon present inquired urgently if any qualified surgeon was immediately available. I spoke up before conscious thought could intercede. "I can execute the procedure." Dr. Yamamoto turned sharply to look at me. "You are a cardiac specialist, Dr. Hartley, not a neurosurgeon." "I have observed a substantial volume of neuro procedures," I countered. "I possess a thorough understanding of the relevant anatomy, and she is my sister." The room fell into stunned silence. "Your sister?" "Yes. And if she bleeds out while we wait for Dr. Hoffman to conclude his current case, the liability falls squarely on us." Dr. Yamamoto studied my expression for a long, uncomfortable moment. "Can you maintain complete objectivity, Hartley?" "I am always objective," I asserted, though I knew the declaration contained a slight professional exaggeration. Yet, I was absolutely capable of divorcing intensely personal feelings from the immediate, urgent requirements of surgical necessity. He gave a sharp nod. "Then scrub in. I will supervise throughout." I prepared for the operation with hands that remained eerily, perfectly still. Vanessa lay unconscious on the operating table, her hair already shaved, the incision site carefully marked. She was entirely unaware that I, the sibling she had betrayed, was about to cut into her brain. Dr. Yamamoto walked me through the essential steps, the precise surgical approach, the necessary angles, the extreme risks involved. We painstakingly opened her skull. The aneurysm was far worse than the radiological scans had indicated. It was enormous, with dangerously fragile walls poised to rupture at any micro-movement. One fractionally incorrect move meant immediate stroke or catastrophic hemorrhage. I operated with a level of precision I didn't consciously know I possessed. Every movement was hyper-controlled, every metal clip positioned with flawless accuracy. Dr. Yamamoto was forced to intervene minimally. I could physically sense the minute difference between healthy brain tissue and the compromised, fragile vessels. The complex architecture of the cerebral blood flow was utterly transparent to me, laid out like a clearly defined map. Was this revenge, or just my duty? 6 excruciating hours into the operation, I successfully placed the final clip. The aneurysm was entirely secured. Blood flow was safely rerouted. There was no rupture. There was no internal bleeding. Vanessa would survive. We meticulously closed the incision, and I stepped out of the suite. My parents were waiting anxiously. They rose immediately upon seeing me, still dressed in my surgical scrubs. "How is she?" my mother whispered, her voice strained and raw. "Stable," I confirmed. "The surgery was successful. She will require careful monitoring, but she is expected to make a full recovery." My mother visibly collapsed against my father, a huge wave of relief washing over her. "Thank God. Who was the surgeon? We need to express our profound gratitude immediately." I slowly removed my surgical cap. I was the surgeon. They simply stared at me, dumbfounded. "You? But you aren't trained in neurosurgery." "I am a surgical fellow," I explained calmly. "I know sufficient operative technique, and I was available the instant she needed someone immediately." My father's expression shifted, conveying a complicated mix of shock and confusion. "You operated on your sister? But you two haven't spoken meaningfully in years. I believed you hated her." I considered his harsh assessment. The memory of the deleted alarm, the stolen chance, the 6 years of cold silence. "I don't hate her. I simply do not trust her. But she required urgent surgery, and I was professionally capable of performing it correctly. So I did." My mother began to weep openly. "Thank you, Jenna. Thank you for saving her life." I nodded once and quietly left the waiting area. I had saved her life, yes, but that single heroic act could not, undo the profound damage she had inflicted upon my career and our relationship. Vanessa regained consciousness 3 days later. I was not present when it happened, occupied instead by a grueling 9-hour heart transplant procedure. By the time I finally finished, she was awake and conversing weakly with my parents. I stopped by her room late that evening. She was propped up in the hospital bed, her head swathed in thick bandages, looking pale and dramatically weakened, but indisputably alive. She caught sight of me standing in the doorway, and her expression instantly morphed, recognition, followed by undeniable shock. "Jenna!" she murmured. "Hello!" I remained by the frame of the door. I didn't move closer. "They told me you performed my surgery." "I did." "Why?" "Because you required a surgeon, and I was immediately available and qualified." She looked down at her hands, resting on the blanket. "I genuinely could have died." "Yes." The aneurysm was positioned badly, but I placed the clips flawlessly and rerouted the blood flow successfully. "You are going to recover fully." "I don't understand your actions," she admitted, looking up again. "After everything you know I did, why did you help me?" I took a deliberate step into the room, closing the door softly behind me. "You want to discuss everything that happened? Fine. Let's finally talk about it." She froze, becoming absolutely rigid. "You deliberately sabotaged my Johns Hopkins interview. You deleted my essential alarm. You concealed my car keys. You placed a call impersonating me to cancel my slot. You destroyed my access to my top choice institution because you were pathologically unable to tolerate the possibility of me surpassing you professionally. Jenna, I am not finished speaking. You executed that betrayal and subsequently faced zero accountability. Our parents flatly refused to believe my account. You never apologized, never once acknowledged the transgression. You simply watched me struggle for 6 years while you effortlessly achieved success in every single metric." I walked slowly toward her bedside. "But here is the critical point you entirely misunderstood. Your sabotage didn't destroy me. It inadvertently made me better. Every single grueling hour I invested in studying while you were asleep. Every extra surgery I volunteered for while you enjoyed your comfort. Every single patient I successfully saved because I fiercely refused to be anything less than extraordinary. All of that success stems directly from what you did. What kind of success is built on spite?" Vanessa was openly crying now, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. "You inadvertently forced me to become a surgeon capable of saving your life when you needed it most. So, yes, I operated on you. Not because I forgive you, and certainly not because we share familial ties. I operated because I am a surgeon, you needed surgery, and I am now technically skilled enough to execute it perfectly." I turned toward the exit. She spoke before I reached the handle. "I am truly sorry." I paused, but did not turn back around. "I was consumed by professional jealousy," she continued, her voice thick. "You were always inherently more intelligent than me, far more driven. I worked tirelessly to be the best, yet you seemed to instinctively grasp everything effortlessly. When you secured that Hopkins interview, I panicked. I thought if you enrolled there, everyone, especially our parents, would finally realize that you were demonstrably better than me. So, I acted destructively, and I have regretted that decision every single day since. I watched your subsequent struggle, and I knew the fault was entirely mine. But I was too arrogant, too proud to admit it. I convinced myself that you'd eventually be fine, that you would get into another institution. But you weren't fine initially, and I fundamentally destroyed your trust in our relationship purely because of my own profound insecurity. I finally turned back to face her. You are correct. You absolutely did that. And this apology, 6 years later, does not fix the damage. I know it doesn't, she replied, wiping her face with the back of her hand. But you are still my sister. And when your life was in danger on that table, I was not going to permit you to die simply because I despise your past actions. Vanessa silently thanked me again for saving her life, acknowledging she didn't deserve my intervention. No one deserves to die from an aneurysm, Vanessa. Not even you, I stated plainly. I exited her room and immediately returned to my duties. We didn't magically reconstruct a relationship. I did not instantly forgive her just because she had finally uttered the words of apology. But a fundamental dynamic had irrevocably shifted. She had, at long last, admitted the full extent of her deception. She had finally acknowledged the immense damage caused. It couldn't erase 6 years of isolation and professional pain, but it was a crucial starting point. Vanessa made a complete recovery from her brain surgery. She returned to her neurosurgery practice 3 months later. She ultimately left Boston after that traumatic event, accepting a prestigious position in California. She sent me a brief text message before departing. "I'm glad you ultimately became a much better surgeon than I ever will be. You unequivocally earned it." I completed my Mass General Fellowship at the top of my class. I was offered a permanent position as an attending cardiac surgeon at Mass General itself, the exact institution where I had operated on my betrayer. The same operating theater where I proved my capacity to separate intense personal emotion from vital surgical necessity. This time, my parents showed up for my white coat ceremony. Both of them. They offered tearful apologies for not trusting me about the Hopkins debacle, for automatically siding with Vanessa's carefully constructed narrative, for failing to see the sheer effort required for me to reach this point. I accepted their apologies graciously, but I could not forget that my success had been achieved despite their lack of support, not because of it. Dr. Yamamoto delivered a speech at my ceremony. He focused on my surgical precision, my unmatched dedication, and my unique ability to manage high-complexity cases that other surgeons instinctively avoided. He declared that I was among the most promising cardiac surgeons he had trained in 30 years. He remained blissfully ignorant of Vanessa's sabotage. He didn't know about the deleted alarm or the stolen interview slot. He only knew that I was exceptionally proficient at preserving human life. 3 years into my attending position, I published a groundbreaking paper detailing a novel technique for repairing exceptionally complex heart valve defects. It was immediately picked up by major medical journals. I began receiving invitations to deliver talks at global conferences. Major hospitals nationwide initiated recruitment efforts for leadership roles. I opted to remain at Mass General, concentrating instead on establishing a specialized program for high-risk cardiac patients, the individuals whom other surgeons deemed medically beyond hope. I rapidly cultivated a professional reputation for accepting seemingly impossible cases and somehow guiding patients through them successfully. My success rate quickly established itself as one of the highest in the entire country. Vanessa and I occasionally communicated now. Not frequently, perhaps a few times annually. She would call on birthdays, send brief texts highlighting interesting cases she had encountered. We were not close, and likely never would be. Too much foundational damage had been inflicted, too many vital years stolen. But we were no longer active adversaries. We had found a precarious way to coexist professionally and personally. She had destroyed something vital between us that could never be perfectly restored, but we had achieved a fragile understanding. My parents attempted to compensate for years of blatant favoritism. They attended my lectures, inquired about my intricate research, and proudly informed all their social circle about their highly distinguished cardiac surgeon daughter. It often felt manufactured and hollow, as if they only valued me now that I had attained visibly public success. But I accepted their efforts, recognizing that harboring grudges required emotional energy better spent on the operating table. 10 years exactly after Vanessa first sabotaged my initial Hopkins interview, my phone rang. The display showed Baltimore, Maryland. It was Dr. Okonkwo, the former admissions director who had regretfully told me she couldn't help, now serving as the esteemed chair of the hospital's surgery department. She explained that Johns Hopkins was constructing an entirely new cardiac surgery program, and they wanted me to assume the leadership role. "Why me?" I asked bluntly. "Because your demonstrated success rate is extraordinary, Dr. Hartley, and your innovative research is genuinely transforming how we approach complex valve repairs. You are the perfect fit for this initiative." "You flatly rejected my application a decade ago," I reminded her, keeping my voice level. A tangible pause extended across the line. "I remember that incident. You claimed your sister engineered the cancellation of your interview." "She did," I confirmed. She finally admitted the truth years later. Another pause. "Then I owe you a genuine apology, Dr. Hartley, and a high-level job offer, if you are amenable to considering it." I mulled over the astonishing irony. The institution that had spurned me was now actively soliciting me for a top leadership post. The stolen interview had, ironically, forced me onto a radically different path, a path that ultimately made me a significantly better surgeon than I might have become had I been accepted the first time. "I am interested," I replied, allowing a small measure of satisfaction into my tone, but I have specific conditions that must be met. We negotiated intensely for 3 solid weeks. I demanded total autonomy over the development of my program, a substantial funding allocation for my research initiatives, and the unfettered ability to train residents according to my unique methodology. Hopkins agreed to every single condition. I accepted the position and relocated to Baltimore, immediately commencing the construction of a cardiac surgery program dedicated to patients universally rejected by other centers. 6 months into my new role, I received an invitation to deliver a keynote lecture at a major national surgery conference. The designated topic was overcoming significant obstacles in surgical training. I almost declined the opportunity. Public speaking was decidedly not my strength. But Dr. Oae, my first great mentor, convinced me that I had an essential story that needed telling. The lecture hall was packed to capacity. Hundreds of surgeons, residents, and wide-eyed medical students filled the seats. I approached the podium and began to narrate my personal history. I told them about applying to medical school and securing that coveted top interview slot. I detailed my sister's precise actions, deleting the alarm, concealing the keys, calling to cancel the opportunity while I lay sleeping, unaware of the impending catastrophe. The immense hall was completely silent. I recounted the subsequent rejections, the necessity of reapplying, the eventual enrollment at a state school instead of the prestigious Hopkins. I confessed that I chose cardiothoracic surgery out of sheer, unadulterated rage, and that I worked twice as hard as every colleague to justify my presence there. Then, I spoke about my sister's sudden aneurysm and the terrible, impossible choice to operate on the person who had tried to ruin my life. She successfully sabotaged my interview primarily because she feared that I would eventually prove to be better than her, I concluded, gazing out at the captivated audience. And you know what? I achieved exactly that. I am better. Not because I possess more inherent talent, but because her betrayal forced me to develop a work ethic far exceeding what I would have pursued otherwise. She attempted to utterly destroy my future and, completely by accident, created the only surgeon available who could successfully save her life. The room immediately erupted. A powerful standing ovation swept through the hall, lasting nearly 2 full minutes. After the lecture concluded, dozens of people approached me, eager to share their own private histories of familial sabotage, relatives who dismissed their ambitions, parents who refused to offer belief, siblings who engaged in destructive rivalry instead of offering support. Medical students tearfully told me they had been repeatedly informed they weren't good enough. Hearing that someone had successfully navigated such profound personal betrayal and still attained the pinnacle of success, they told me, instilled tremendous hope. That night, my phone chimed. It was Vanessa. I hesitated, then answered the call. "I watched your lecture," she said immediately. "Someone uploaded the video online." I waited patiently for her to continue. "Everything you articulated was true. I did attempt to sabotage your future, and you absolutely did become better than me as a direct result." Her voice momentarily cracked. "I am truly sorry. I've said it before, but I don't believe I truly comprehended the full magnitude of what I stole from you until I heard you recount the story to an auditorium filled with strangers. I took your dream school and forced you into a position where you had to construct your entire career from scratch. And yet, somehow, you still achieved more visible success than I have. I did not succeed despite you," I corrected her gently. "I succeeded because I ultimately refused to let your actions define the outcome of my life." "I recognize that truth," she admitted, "but you are absolutely entitled to retain your anger about it. You are allowed to hate me." "I don't hate you, Vanessa. I simply do not trust you, and that condition will probably be permanent." She was silent for a long moment. "That is a perfectly fair assessment. I earned that distance." We conversed for a few more minutes, then ended the call. It wasn't perfect closure, but it was definitive acknowledgement. She finally understood the scope of her actions, and I had successfully moved beyond allowing that act to control my emotional future. My cardiac surgery program at Hopkins flourished. Within 3 years, we had achieved a ranking among the elite cardiac surgery programs nationally. I trained residents who went on to become departmental leaders at other major hospitals. I published research papers that fundamentally altered surgical protocols nationwide. My patients, the complex, critical cases everyone else rejected, survived at rates that captured national attention. I garnered prestigious awards, accepted invitations to join the editorial boards of major medical journals, and was offered department chair positions across the country. I chose to stay at Hopkins because I had created something profoundly meaningful there. The school that once rejected me now bore witness to my transformative success. 15 years after the day of the sabotaged interview, I received a formal letter from the medical school administration. They desired to establish an endowed scholarship in my professional name for students who had navigated extraordinary obstacles to pursue a career in medicine. Students exactly like the 24-year-old version of me, fighting against unsupportive family structures, recovering from devastating professional setbacks, refusing to quit despite every rational reason to abandon the dream. I accepted immediately, contributing a significant amount of my own earnings to the initial fund. We officially named it the Second Chance Scholarship, based on the realization that sometimes the path you are forced onto is ultimately better than the one you originally envisioned. Vanessa called when she heard the news of the scholarship. "That's truly incredible, Jenna. You're helping people like you, people like us." I corrected her. "You overcame professional obstacles too, Vanessa. Different kinds, but still obstacles." "I was your obstacle," she reminded me wryly. "You were one of them, yes," I conceded. "But you are no longer controlling that narrative." She laughed, the sound mingling sadness and relief. "When did you suddenly become so mature, Jenna?" "When I finally stopped allowing what you did to matter more than what I had accomplished without you." We began talking slightly more often after that conversation. Not constantly, but sufficient contact that when she eventually married, I received an invitation. When I published a definitive textbook on advanced cardiac surgery techniques, she was one of the very first people to purchase a copy. We would never recover the relationship we should have shared. Too much emotional damage, too many lost years. But we had achieved a functional connection, an understanding that we had both committed errors and both successfully matured beyond them. My parents hosted a celebratory dinner when my textbook was released. Both of their daughters were present, both successful in their fields. My father offered a sentimental toast, expressing pride in his surgeon daughters. I consciously recalled the years he had refused to believe my account, the times he had automatically chosen Vanessa's version of events without any scrutiny. But I also considered his current efforts, attending my academic lectures, attempting to read my research papers, genuinely trying to understand the complexity of my work now. "To my daughters," he proclaimed, raising his glass, both of whom prove that sheer determination matters infinitely more than circumstance. I caught Vanessa's eye across the dinner table. She offered a small, genuine smile, not the satisfied smirk of a decade past, but something authentic. We toasted to that truth, to determination, to becoming individuals our younger, more destructive selves wouldn't recognize, to rebuilding meaningful lives from the profound wreckage of sabotage and betrayal. 20 years have passed since the day my alarm was deleted. I am now the chief of cardiac surgery at Johns Hopkins. I lead a program that trains the next generation of top surgeons. I perform complex operations on hearts that other surgeons declare beyond repair. I instruct my residents that the word impossible is simply an inefficient way to describe something difficult. Students routinely ask me how I achieved this position, how I constructed this career from the ground up. I share the unvarnished truth. My sister sabotaged my medical school interview, deleted my alarms, hid my vehicle keys, and stole my opportunity at my dream school. She aggressively attempted to shatter my future because she was terrified I would eclipse her professional achievements. And in her intense effort to stop my ascent, she accidentally provided the exact motivation I needed to become truly extraordinary. I tell them that sometimes, the individuals who inflict the deepest pain also teach the most invaluable life lessons. That profound betrayal can be successfully utilized as potent fuel, provided you are sufficiently angry, relentlessly stubborn, and utterly refuse to allow it to break your will. I discuss the necessity of operating on Vanessa's aneurysm, saving the life of the very person who had tried to destroy mine, choosing to function as a competent surgeon rather than remaining a bitter victim. Some of the students instantly grasp the lesson. Some have their own Vanessas, their own personal saboteurs. I tell those students that the most effective form of revenge is constructing a success so overwhelmingly undeniable that the people who actively try to suppress you are forced to witness your triumph. That living a successful, meaningful life is the most devastating response to past betrayal. Vanessa and I communicate a few times each year now. She is a highly successful neurosurgeon running her own private practice in California. She is skilled at her profession, perhaps not as intensely driven as I am, but competent, professional, and respected by her peers. She never experienced another medical emergency, never required further surgery. Sometimes, I briefly wonder what the outcome would have been if I had chosen revenge over my medical oath. If I had simply stepped back and allowed Dr. Hoffman to handle the case upon his arrival, choosing retribution instead of medicine. But that calculated choice was never genuinely an option. Because I function as a surgeon first, and only secondarily as a betrayed sister. Because the preservation of life always outweighs the settling of old personal scores. The large lecture hall where I currently teach residents at Johns Hopkins now proudly bears my name, the Jenna Surgical Education Center, funded through royalties from my textbook and my global speaking honoraria. Students file into the room weekly, eager to learn surgical principles from me. I stand at the front of the room and reflect on that 24-year-old version of myself. Devastated, betrayed, watching her entire future dissolve because a trusted sibling had sabotaged her ambition. That previous version of me could never have conceived that she would end up right here, teaching at the institution that rejected her, commanding the program she was deemed unworthy to attend, saving complex lives with hands that gained their precision through raw, furious determination. My sister attempted to dismantle me entirely. Instead, she unintentionally rendered me unstoppable. And every surgery I execute, every life I successfully save, every student I successfully train, that serves as conclusive proof that betrayal does not have to signal the end of your personal story. Sometimes, it is merely the catalyst for becoming the person you were always destined to be. I encountered Vanessa at a major surgical conference last year. We shared a brief cup of coffee between scheduled sessions, discussing our professional trajectories, our personal lives, and the vast distance between who we used to be and the people we had ultimately become. She gently asked if I had ever managed to truly forgive her. I offered her the absolute truth. I had moved completely past the incident, but the word forgiveness didn't accurately describe my emotional state. But you fundamentally altered the trajectory of my entire life, I explained. You made me harder, significantly more driven, and inherently less trusting of others. Those developments aren't factors to be forgiven. They're simply facts that I had to accept. But I am grateful in a strange way, I admitted, because I genuinely don't believe I would have pushed myself this relentlessly hard if you hadn't forcibly shoved me out of the easy path. She nodded slowly, recognizing the truth of my statement. I successfully created my own monster, didn't I? No, I corrected her firmly. You created a highly skilled surgeon who was capable of saving your life when everything depended on it. That is not a monster. That is simply someone who absolutely refused to allow you to win. We finished our coffee and proceeded to separate conference sessions. I watched her walk away and experienced a genuine sense of neutrality. No residual anger, no enduring resentment, no lingering trace of old pain. Just the quiet, profound satisfaction of knowing I had built a meaningful life she could not possibly touch. The worst thing she had ever done to me had, ironically, become the bedrock foundation of every success I had subsequently achieved. My sister sabotaged my opportunity at medical school. Then, years later, she desperately required the highly specialized surgeon I was forced to become. And I was technically skilled enough to save her life. Not because she deserved my intervention, but because I had transformed into a professional who saves people, even those who tried to destroy me completely. That is the only real revenge that matters. Not seeking to hurt them back, but attaining such unparalleled mastery in your chosen craft that you entirely transcend their petty betrayal. Becoming undeniably, absolutely extraordinary despite every calculated obstacle they placed in your trajectory. She tried hard to ensure I failed. I became the best in my field instead. And every day I operate, every life I save, that is conclusive proof that she ultimately lost. If this story resonates with you, Please ensure you like this video and subscribe to Reddit Chronicles channel for more deeply emotional true stories.